right. Well, it is 3 o'clock, so we are going to go ahead and get started. Um, I am so excited to have Jen Clark here with us today to talk about this topic that has been in such great demand over the last year or so. Jen Clark, such a special professional because she started her career as a special education teacher turned speech language pathologist
Hmm.
with a certificate in assistive technology from the University of Colorado, Denver. So, such an amazing background. Throughout her career, she has specialized in servicing children who have complex communication needs. Um, I'm really excited for this presentation because Ben was with us for the Conference for Assistive Technology and Education in June. And I can tell you that the feedback that we received on this presentation was just outstanding. So we're all in for a terrific hour, hour and a half of content. Ben, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you so much, Chris. I know we got those certificates together. Isn't
We
that
did.
crazy? Like last year or 2 years ago, I'm pretty sure. Um, so, so as Chris said, my name is Jen. I'm here to talk about eye gaze and CVI, and access to robust communication. I would just say, I just want to make sure I'm recognizing. So I originally presented this, a version of this, I guess I would say, at ATIA in um, 2020 or 2021. And I just want to make sure that I'm recognizing the first time I put this together, I presented it with Emmy Yao, who's now at Children's Hospital,
Oh, what happened?
um, and
What
Sophia
just
Benson
happened?
Goldberg, who
Did
is
you trip, hon? Oh man,
who just went
your
to
sticky hand. Oh. Mm. What did you hit?
there, who is now a professor. She just moved to Oregon State. So just want to recognize them for their part in this work too. Um, Here's our sign in. I can always put this back on at the end if anybody needs it, and I believe they put it in the chat. Um, just a little bit about me. Thank you, Chris, for that lovely introduction. I do have a bachelor's of education in special and elementary education from Montana State. In 2002, I came to Colorado because in Montana, teachers were making, I think, $14,000 a year. So I would have taken a pay cut from my waitressing job to be a teacher. So I thought, well, I'll just move to Colorado for a couple years. I started teaching in Colorado Springs in District 49. I taught a severe needs classroom for 5 years, and then I started getting really, for lack of a better word, frustrated with some of the speech language services that some of my clients were getting. I snuck an AAC specialist into my classroom, which probably isn't what you should say, but that's what I did. And like through working with her, I kind of got inspired and felt like I could do it better. And so it kind of turned into one of those if you can't beat them, join them situations. And I started grad school in Greeley and completed that program and became an SLP. So grand total, I've worked with kids with complex communication needs for about 22 years. And I really have spent my time as an SLP specializing in the area of AAC. One of my passions within the area of AAC is eye gaze for kids with complex bodies. All right, so just financial disclosures. I am employed by Inspiring Talkers and by the University of Northern Colorado. I was for the summer conference gifted registration, but I don't have any other financial or non-financial relationships to disclose to all of you. Not in it for the money today. What we're going to try and do for our objectives today. Um, we are going to identify 3 techniques for introducing eye gaze to individuals with CVI. We're going to describe 3 strategies to make eye gaze on AAC more accessible. And then we're going to talk about characteristics and perceptions of cortical vision impairments that frequently rule out. So it's getting so much better. I feel like we're like expanding our understanding so much, but for a long time, what I would run into is a lot of times there would be this kind of gatekeeping that as soon as we saw CVI on a client or a student's paperwork, we would immediately rule out eye gaze. We would just like shove it to the side and we would at first go to switch scanning almost always or direct selection with super small layouts. And I don't see that as much anymore. I feel like we're doing, I feel like, sorry, I'm trying to find who that is so I can mute. I feel like we're doing a little bit better service in our understanding of that. But we'll talk about that as well. All right. So cortical vision impairment
After
is a 1 second, please.
Braille,
I'm going to go ahead and ask everyone again to make sure that you've got your microphones muted.
I'm trying to mute you as you come in, but I can't see everyone in my view. Okay. All right, so let's change this back. So cortical vision impairment is a neurologically based vision impairment. A normal eye exam by an optometrist isn't going to necessarily diagnose it, but what we know is we see these ataxic eye movements, these palsies, sometimes visual field deficits, short attention span, particularly for processing visual information, right? A light sensitivity, sometimes a preference for certain colors, sometimes drawn to movements. Sometimes there are those kids who use that peripheral, so they're always looking out of the corner of their eye. It's estimated that 21% of children with neurogenic disorders have CVI. So often we see it with our kids with cerebral palsy, right? Or some of the different low incidence syndrome diagnosis. So, and then within the population that has a visual impairment, it's estimated it affects 30 to 40% of that population. Okay. So if 21% of kids with oh my goodness, with neurogenic disorders have CVI, we can establish that relationship, right? And understand that 30 to 40% of that population is visually impaired. And these statistics come from Roman and Bosch. We'll just talk a little about CVI and AAC and like the lack of research out there. And I just was reading this like really interesting discussion group that was talking about like how SLPs sometimes struggle because we use evidence-based practice. So kind of, we think about the triangle and we'll talk about that, where a big part of our evidence-based practice is for sure our client perspectives, for sure that evidence, right? We're wanting to do like good research-based therapy, but we also understand that like there isn't enough of these kids out there. Like we're not going to get beautiful randomized controlled trials, right? We're not going to get these cohort studies. And this discussion was talking about the difference between like SLPs working with BCBAs and how sometimes there's a conflict in the way that we're taught to apply the research and our evidence base. But really, when we are working with such a vulnerable, low incidence population, like there just aren't enough kids out there to have some of these like really, really, well put together double-blind studies. So we are depending on this evidence-based practice, which is the triangle, where we're using evidence, we're using client perspectives, and then a huge piece of this is our clinical expertise. So our background, our experiences. Okay, so we talk about, excuse me, the lack of research. We talk about our reliance on feature matching. So really, I mean, feature matching is current best practice, which for those of you, just to make sure, for those of you who might not be SLPs, and I'm just going to check the chat because it popped back up and make sure everyone's good. I'll try and check it periodically. And of course, I'll do questions at the end. But for those of us who are not SLPs or who aren't doing feature matching, a feature match is just at the end of diagnostic trials, sitting down, usually as a team, usually with parents and hopefully with the person who we're evaluating, and going through the different features on all the different devices or systems we may have trialed and talking about like what is the best combination of features to meet this individual's current and future needs, and how are we going to figure that out as the person who's using the device and the stakeholders around that person. So we're still doing features match, which is which is amazing, but not a perfect system, right? And is clearly open to bias. We also, we're talking about recent advances in the eye tracking cameras and how much better they're getting. I remember 10 years ago going to do an eye gaze eval, and the person would have to be almost completely still. If they had any like, rocking or any movement, that camera just could not keep up. It would take like 20 to 30 seconds to come back into focus. The person moved out of the visual field. The cameras are so much better. They've gotten so much more advanced. And that really has opened up a door, particularly with people with CVI. I don't know if some of you have seen the new article out about the Apple update that's going to put eye gaze onto iPads and iPhones. And I just think it's all so exciting and getting so much more accessible and hopefully cheaper, right? But we think about all those things and we think about that going into using AAC with individuals who have CVI. These advancements are huge. I do want to just reference one study. Sophia actually found this, and it's a case study, and it talks about a 13-year-old named Jacob. And he talks about the research study having two phases to increase a range in visual field accessible, and then unexpected communication outcomes. And I just think if you want to go and look for this Walker 2016, it's in my references, and it is it's a good one to look at, a good one to share also when folks are looking to the research. All right. This is part of a study that was done at UNC Chapel Hill, where they used the gaze tracker on a Tobii Dynavox device, the gaze viewer software, and it's talking about attention to print before and after print referencing. So what they were doing is they were putting these visuals in front of little gals with Rett. And at first, they were just putting up the picture and reading the story. So tomatoes are grown in the garden. And then through the gaze viewer, they could see where the children's eyes went on the screen. And so you can see in this picture, like her eyes are going immediately, like kind of her default is that she's going to the picture. She's looking at the tomatoes, right? And so they did that for a while to get some good data to see where these girls were looking, these girls with CVI, while they were reading a story, and they were immediately going to the picture. And then this is just kind of a heat map to show how long they were on different points. So she's looking at the green tomato. They went through and they started training parents to reference the print to talk about tomatoes are growing in the garden and pointing to the words as they read. And these are all books on Tar Heel Reader. So the parents did that for a while, and then they went back and they looked. So again, here's CVI and visual attention to print before print referencing. Okay, this little person too, looking at the picture, looking at the sky. So families practiced that for a while, and they would start pointing to the text as they read. And look what happened with the gaze and where it went on the page. So now they're down lower. They're still looking at the pictures. They're still attending to that. But these are without modifications. We didn't make this on a yellow background. We just wanted the attention to the print. Here's another one. So this family has a new baby, and you can see them attending to the print down here. So I think like just going through that, giving some examples and really speaking to functional vision and range scores are amazing. I think they give you so much information. I know that they're going through and they're making some changes to that assessment, but sometimes too, just having access and instruction and having your attention brought to different things, we know that functional vision and range scores can change and get better over time. And so just being really mindful of that in our decision making when we're choosing access methods for children, particularly with CVI. All right, so I'll go through my case studies now. And I'm going to double check the chat while we're in transition. Okay, so this is just about, could it be that they're avoiding, I mean, of course, yeah, that is definitely, they could be avoiding the visual complexity because we know, right, that that children with CVI tend not to like that. But I don't think, I mean, no, they were direct instructed on the print. So that was within the parameters of that particular study. All right, that was a question that was in the chat. They were asking if they were avoiding the visual complexity of the picture. All right, so my first case study is Ava. We're going to talk about Ava a little bit. She is older now, but at the time we wrote this, she was 14. She has a medical diagnosis of CDKL5, refractory epilepsy. She's diagnosed with low vision, including CVI, ocular motor apraxia, and strabismus. She had, when we started doing diagnostic trials with her, she had a Dynavox VMAX. That was in November of 2011. She accessed it through direct selection, and she usually had 2 to 4 buttons per page. There had been some modifications. So this is an example of one page where they had done the background's black, right? So bathroom, drink, snack. Those are all pretty poppy, like we can see. But here's help. And for those of you who are familiar with symbol sticks, help is 2 stick figures. So this is a person who's standing and then legs would go down this way. And this is a person who maybe has fallen and needs some help up. But when they modified the pictures and modified the background, this symbol just turned completely black with these 2 little dots on it. Which, I mean, if that means help to Ava, that's, rather arbitrary, but just being mindful in our changes, because this really makes for a symbol that isn't very representative. Her prior system, so in 2015, when she came, as I said, she'd had a VMAX, but that was no longer working well. It had been away for several months for repair. She had an iPad with Proloquo to go, some simple choice boards on that. Her mom was very, very hesitant to even trial eye gaze. But we talked about it, and we talked about direct selection versus eye gaze. We did a pretty long diagnostic trial with her at that time. We tried a Novachat 12 that she could access through direct selection. So she, with a key guard, could put her hand on different buttons, kind of drop her hand different places on the screen to request items, and some core words to direct. But it wasn't awesome, because she was always limited to about 12 buttons was what she could get with her hands effectively. We also tried a WinSlate 13 that we accessed through eye gaze, and then at that time it was an i12 plus. So we tried the i12 plus, and we ended up going with the i12 plus because it was kind of all in one, but we did include a key guard with that order for times of frustration or fatigue. And that was really per parent request that we could switch back and forth. We had a Tobii Dynamic system that we could use with Ava during her therapy sessions while she was waiting to go through funding. And by the time the device came, really, we didn't have a need for the key guard anymore, but it's one of those things. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So we did go ahead and order that. Oops, that one got out of order. I'm so sorry. This was another example of her old layouts. So this is a choice board with 4 items on it with real photographs from her home. So this is her beanbag chair. And this is her chair, her bed, and then a bath. All right. So when we got going with Ava, we weren't immediately successful with communication software. During our trials, we did a lot of cause and effect games, but she still preferred to use your hands to access communication layouts. There was a day I was working with Ava, and we were sitting on the floor, and she had her hands kind of like resting by my legs, and I was like sitting behind her, kind of helping her to sit up. But she couldn't, her hands weren't like reaching up that far to hit the device. And so we were playing a farm game, and it's always my funniest memory that she started pecking the farm animals with her nose. But really, like, it took a while for her to understand truly that she could access more things and she could access more effectively with her eyes. That was a lot of teaching and a lot of instruction. So We did get through it, but we were in diagnostic trials for a period of 4 months. We started once we started working in Communicator and getting away from some of the cause effect softwares and games and like getting around to different parts of the screen. We moved to a 12 location phrase-based layout on Communicator 5 that we had kind of built ourselves, which looked kind of similar to like a multi-chat 15 where it's I want, I need, I like, those kinds of things. We moved to a 20 location layout in Communicator 5 later, and we did invert her colors, you can see. But in this layout, we were finally able to give her access to a little bit more word-based communication for autonomy. She still had some phrases up here um, in this bubble box right here, but she was able to use more single words again to give her more of that autonomy in her communication. So she could say, stop, different, or more, go, those kinds of things, and start putting those combinations together. All right. And now Ava today, in 2019, she was eligible for a new device again because her Toby was nearly 5 years old. At that time, we trialed immediately a Toby i13. We tried an Accent 1400 with Look, and we tried a Winslate for kids. She did very well with the Toby i13. Really, she did okay with the Winslate as well. But what we noticed was when we put her on the 1400, that look camera just seemed to be slightly more accurate. There were more things we could adjust because her vision is complex with that apraxia and things like that. For any of you who've taken the Master Access class from PRC Saltillo, you know that you can really, really dial in that camera with some of their settings. And with that, we could put her on much smaller targets. And so with that, she could do a 45 or a 60 location layout. And that was amazing. Amazing, amazing. So that's what she's using now. She also uses, just to mention, an OE transboard or something low tech for things like if she's doing a test at school and they need, her to answer using one of 4 words, because sometimes she will do things like you'll say, "How are you feeling today, Ava?" And she will say diabolical, or she'll do almost, she'll get around on her device and do just about anything but the thing you asked her to do. So if you need a close set answer, we use some low tech still too. All right. We are gonna do Maggie next. So Maggie's our next case study. Maggie was 6 when she came to her practice. She had diagnoses including cerebral palsy, epilepsy, cortical vision impairment. She'd had a right hemispherectomy, so she had some left visual field challenges. She had some cuts. She had glasses, and she would vocalize. She would say hi and bye, cry to indicate that she was sad. Previously, when she came, she had a Tobii Dynavox I-110. She was using that with a key guard, as you can see here, for 6 location layouts. Yeah, so she had things like feel and help, and they had also inverted the colors. Sometimes that was mounted on her wheelchair. We trialed with Maggie an Accent 1400 with MUI. We did that because she had just gotten her I-110 funded from another clinic, and we had a donated Accent 1400 available, and we weren't able to get a new device funded for her with a change of access. So we used the donated device for a while. We got a table mount funded for positioning, and we focused on increasing engagement with her eyes with things like Tomoko. We did a 28 location, 1-hit layout. So that was kind of the appropriate number for her at that time. We modified it so that some buttons were hidden and we could kind of checkerboard it. And then instead of always inverting her color, sometimes we did color modifications. So we did some like brighter color coding on the buttons. So here's a picture of Maggie right here. And this is on her 28 location. All right, I'll try and play this for you. If I can get my share bar out of the way. Okay, so here's Maggie interacting with her system.
Do you feel tired?
I feel
Blue.
Blue.
Bad. Stop.
Oh.
So we're trying to model for her, but she's so fast. I'll let you watch it just one more
Do you
time.
feel tired?
I feel
Blue. Blue.
bad. Stop.
Oh.
So she's so fast on that. That yeah, she is going faster than we're able to model. And then here it is. All right. Today, Maggie's moved up to a Unity 36. She's still in a one-hit layout with some modifications. She still really loves playing eye gaze games and different games to work on like controlling the screen with her eyes. Before school ended, her teacher and peers reported that she had been using her SGD to engage with classmates in her classroom. And she uses it for a variety of communication functions, including protesting, requesting, and commenting. Sometimes those can be rather telegraphic in nature, where she's just putting together core words, because we all know at a single hit layout how limiting that can be. But her communication is beautiful. The way she's using words autonomously is beautiful. And it just is a lot more language available for her in her day-to-day context than when she had 6 buttons accessing through direct selection. All right, and the last one I'm going to talk about as we wrap up today is, or as we go through this today, is Paul. So Paulie was with us. He came when he was 10. He had a variety of diagnoses too, including CP, CVI, strabismus, epilepsy, and STXBP1. At that time, he could verbalize mom, and he could say more and all done, and he had a really reliable yes and no response. He came in 2015 and he already had Tobii Dynavox i15. He had completed a switch placement evaluation and he had a head switch. And he attempted really, really nicely to use auditory scan with a single switch. But parent was really struggling with it, struggling with just using it in their day-to-day lives. And hypothesized that the cognitive and motoric load of just the single switch, it was taking too long and it was frustrating to Paul. And I know I find myself in this position often when I'm, working with kids, when we're working with switch scanning. It is just so laborious and such a high cognitive load. And I mean, I know we know that about switch scanning, but I'm just being so mindful of that when we're doing evaluations and trying to figure out, the best access, or gosh, I feel like sometimes I'm trying to figure out the least worst access for a system, right? And so with Paul, since he already had an I-15, we immediately started with eye gaze. We immediately switched to this. He had a variety of pages. He used some of his old pages from switch scanning, some new pages that we made, and it was anywhere from 2 locations up to 12 on the layouts that had been made for him on Communicator 5. We did some high contrast icons, and we did a laser pointer kind of over his shoulder for attention. For Paul, we ordered a special screen protector to reduce the glare. And then we started going through and making efforts to streamline his pages and improve opportunities for motor planning and use of core words. Eventually, we switched over to TD Snap for Paul. And we got away from Communicator 5. And now he's using a 9-location Snap Plus Core layout that he scrolls through. Sorry, I wanted to show you the picture. So here's his 9 buttons. He must be at the end of the page because here's a home button, but usually there's a scroll up and scroll down there, as I'm sure you're familiar with. So he really understood that scrolling. He was just initiating trials for a new device, super successful using high and low tech eye gaze to communicate with others, but he also uses his for a variety of communication functions, including protesting, commenting, requesting, and directing. Here's what his looks like. Just checking chat really quick. So how do these case studies, what are the implications for our practice and for our research? AA assessment is diverse and complex. And I know that sounds like probably very obvious, but I really always appreciate this quote from Kathy Binger. I think that, when we talk about features matching, when we go back and we talk about, something, gosh, as basic as just the participation model that we all got in grad school. When we talk about participation, we talk about features matching, we talk about access. Like we want all of our students slash clients to have the most complex system that they can reasonably access, right? We want them to have so many words and be able to communicate, again, that autonomy, like whatever, to whomever, whenever. And so I know sometimes we have to do that in steps. But really, when we're doing our features matching, we're thinking about what can they do today and how can they grow into this? We want to think about like that hardware and software piece, of course, like which language organization are they doing the best with? But so many of the language softwares out there, the AAC softwares out there, it's not like 20 years ago. I mean, most of them are fairly robust. So we are able to provide that access to language. But I just think it's so, so important that we don't rule out an access method completely based on a diagnosis. So that diagnosis of CVI should not be a deal breaker for at least pulling out the device and trying it and seeing how it goes. I think that, examining that role of eye tracking, thinking about your layout and arrangement, thinking about seating and positioning always, working with, your OTs, your PTs, your TVIs, looking at those environmental factors. Like I was just having a discussion recently with a peer who works in the schools, and we were talking about a client of mine who is using eye gaze, and my SLP friend who's in the schools is like, we're just having the hardest time here. Like she doesn't activate it. Like I don't know if she can't, like I don't know if it's too complex. And of course, like me as private therapist gets like a little puffy for a minute, and I'm like, well, it's not too complex because of course she needs all the words. And we're having this dialogue, and it's not like heated or anything, but it's like we're both like frustrated, because I am like, what do you mean she's not using it there? And then the person at the school is like, what do you mean she's using it for this at your clinic? And it's so hard because kids are going to be different in different places, At the clinic that I work in, I can control the lighting. I can take them into a small therapy room, and it can be, just 2 or 3 of us in the room. I can control the volume. I don't have like 6 other kids in a classroom running around. So kids are going to look different in different places. So we got to pull in those environmental factors for access for kids with suspected and confirmed CVI. All right, now we are to the part where we can do questions. And I'm just going to put my emails at the end of this presentation. So if anybody wants to reach out with additional things, feel free. But I wanted to leave plenty of time for dialogue and discussion.
Jennifer, there's one question in the chat that says, throughout your case studies, did you find that students were more able to generalize these skills and independently access their devices with a 1-hit location compared to 2-hit locations?
Yeah, that jump to sequence is really hard on the PRC Saltillo system. Sorry. It is really, especially if you're doing like more of the sequenced is hard, and I will just leave it at that. But what I do use a lot more with my clients who are using eye gaze on a PRC Saltillo system, I will use more of the word power layouts and not as much of the unity, just depending, because for that very reason, because going from the single hit is so limiting, but then going up to the sequence, like 2 hits for every word when you're working that hard through eye gaze can be incredibly frustrating. Does that answer that question? Feel free to speak up, and I'll try to make the chat bigger so I can keep up a little better.
That was my question. That did answer my question. I'm using TD Snap,
Mhm.
but yes, that
Yeah.
answered it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so QR code didn't load. Can you get a copy? All right. We talked about avoiding the pictures because of visual complexity. I don't know if you can get Tomoko games on a Toby. I'm sure you could pay for them privately. And yes, they're recording the presentation. And then I'm just trying to get to the last one here. Have you had much luck with head tracking? Oh, I love this. And how do you balance visual processing rate? This is dwell times. Yep. And then students with CVI have more significant problem. How do you approach those kids? Okay. Repeat the company. Okay. Yep. Okay. So I'll try and do all these things. So PRC Saltillo, on their accent line, you can take a course called the Master Access course. And in the Master Access course, they'll teach you about all different kinds of access, including switch scanning and head tracking, not just eye gaze, right? Because eye gaze isn't the end all be all in alternative access. And I don't want like any of this to sound like that. Really, like my main point is just try not to gatekeep based on diagnosis. And here's like some stories where we've had success. But that being said, in the master access class, there's so many settings on the PRC Saltillo products that you can adjust the stream and you can adjust the X and the Y axis. And there's all of these things for kids with very complex ocular motor apraxias. There's all these things you can adjust to help them be more successful. So that is like kind of a good thing and like a hard thing, because then sometimes you'll get everything dialed in just the way you want it. And like, oh, please save it as a profile, because I can't tell you how many times some well-meaning individuals come in and like adjusted these things I have adjusted down to the minutia and changed it without really knowing what they're doing. And then you're like ready to cry. But those are amazing things that are available on that particular line of devices. The other thing, like when I'm doing features matching, another thing I think about is like, depending on, right, because we're doing a features match, we're trying to look at the whole picture, we're trying to look at all the participation. And so sometimes I'll look at, I almost call like the I series from Tobii Dynavox, like sometimes I call them idiot proof, which sounds unkind, but really is not my intention. Only because like it out of the box, like there's not all these adjustments to make. So you're going to like pull it out, look at it, and it's either going to like work or not work. There's also, I mean, all of the Winslate stuff from Forbes, like these all have different strengths. The nice thing with Tobii Dynavox is it's all built into one system. So like if you're wanting to get a key guard to put over that, you don't have to like try to justify a second access method as you're going through funding if it works. But like Winslate has all these cool like environmental controls and all these different features with that. And then now in Colorado, we also have New Motion is carrying some of the smart box line. So we have access to like grid pads and all of those things, which are like amazing devices with amazing software on them. So there's lots of things out there. But that is the brand that really has the super fine tuning and the settings on the camera. Okay. The next question was, have I had much luck with eye tracking with the iPad specifically? Beth, it depends. Like, and I know that's a terrible answer. I know that's not a great answer. It depends. So head tracking on the iPad specifically, I feel like I have had some clients who are successful with it, but I feel like they have to have a lot more kind of bodily control, and like it's been a little hard for some of like my littlers or some of my youngers or some of my clients who have had a lot of movement. I feel like eye tracking on the iPad, I want it to be this like easy, amazing thing. And it isn't quite yet, but I'm hoping that it starts getting better. I still like head tracking with like the dot and the camera. So but I don't recommend that a lot. But yeah, I would like eye tracking on the iPad to be easier, but I've had really mixed, just depending on the client. I've put it in front of a lot of clients, and it's been sometimes awesome, sometimes not as awesome. So it just depends. Like, I feel like you just have to put the tools in front of them and see how it goes. And it multiple times, right? Like put it in front of them multiple times. Okay. You're welcome. I hope that answered your question. Feel free to write more if it didn't, or just unmute yourself and we can just talk too. The TBI I work with only wants a grid size of 4 for a student with it. Oh, yeah. Okay, so here's the question. The TBI I work with only wants a grid size of 4 for a student with a degenerative disorder. I've been wanting to start with TD, SNAP, Motor Plan 30. Any suggestions? I think this goes back to the conversation we were having about like the triangles, you know what I mean, and evidence-based practice based on our experiences versus like empirical studies. And so I know like I would get together, I would have a conversation with your TBI. I would also turn on like the data tracking feature, and I would do a lot of like data tracking of what the student is saying or doing when they're in their 4 button, how many activations are they having in that? And then when I flip flop over to the Motor Plan 30, here's what the language sampling looks like that's been taken. So if you know how to do that in TD Snap, turn that on and hopefully let the data speak for itself of like, look, they were able to do this, this, and this. And then I would have like a serious heart to heart. Hopefully you have that kind of a relationship with your TBI that like you can have a professional conversation. I know I don't always have that with my coworkers, but let's hope that you could have a conversation about modeling and about robust communication and about like the ethics of giving each child as much language as they can handle. And talk about like, you know, going back to the Roman landscape materials of like, where are they on their range scores? Like, what do we know about that? But like really like letting your data speak for itself of like, I put them in this Motor Plan 30, I like adjusted the dwell, I did this, and this, and like look at these like single words they're using, or look at these 2-word combinations that they're using within like the context of this activity. And I mean, you can even write notes for yourself of like, okay, they were in, I'm assuming, I don't know that you're a speech therapist. I'm sorry, I didn't look, but like, let's say you're taking them to speech, you know, because I'm just taking it back to me. Oh, it's all about me. But like I took them back to speech and I had them for 30 minutes and we were playing this game, this game, this game, and this game, right? So we were playing Potato Head and we were playing, I don't know, coloring on the iPad and we were doing this. And like, look, during Mr. Potato Head with like very few prompts, look at how they're using their body parts words, or look how they're using like put or go, and how we can apply that to this context, you know, but really taking that back and making your case, but also just talking about best practices too, and access to robust communication and autonomy. I hope that answers that question. Okay, I'll see what's next. We talked about the company. Can you talk about students with CVI who have more significant problems using their eyes? How do you approach these kids? So maybe like, and then any strategies for a 2-switch core scanner on the PRC accent, switching to a PRC 1400. He's proficient with on blast. He's pointing to a screen. Okay. All right. So, where can I learn about the different kinds of eye gaze? Oh my gosh, there's so many questions. This is amazing. I'm so glad I saved all this extra time. Okay, all right, I'm gonna try, but I talk pretty fast, so hopefully, you know, I'll get through quite a bit. So more significant problems using their eyes. How do you approach those kids? Are you meaning like when you say more significant, are you meaning like strabismus and nystagmus, or are you meaning like not opening, or are you thinking like apraxias and movements?
Okay, so I'm just going to unmute because I think that's easier. I'm thinking of kids. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Jeannie. I'm thinking about kids who don't have maybe blink reflex or tracking at all, or, you know, stamina for
to have their posture, to be up in a chair long enough to like, yeah, of course. I mean,
Yeah, I'm
then
just
like,
because I
yeah.
feel like we get like I feel like we get so I'm a TVI,
Hmm.
and I work closely with our AT team, and I feel like we do get like a fair number of kids whose maybe families or private therapists suggest devices, and maybe the whole team's not like on the same page, right? And
Hmm.
we do a learning media assessment in our I for our IEPs, where we just look at functional vision and how kids are using their eyes and
Yeah.
their hearing and their touch.
Yeah.
And I
And
just
their
feel like I
preferred.
don't like a good starting place. Like, where would you start with a kid like that whose family is like, we really want to try eye gaze or we really want to do this?
Oh gosh.
Um,
Yeah. And that's never happened to me before. I've never been on a team that we're not all on exactly the same page.
right, right.
Yes. I mean, I think making it really fun, like really, so doing things like using the different games, like gosh, those grid devices they're big and like the cameras are really good. And so can you do something where you're doing like the static targets and just trying to get like you're trying to build that visual attention, right? But eye gaze doesn't always have to be tech either. Like that's the other piece is like you can do things like an e-transport and just work on helping them get their functional vision up to a point where like they can attend to something, and don't make it like testing, like for the love of Pete. Don't be like, show me the cat, show me the right. And I know I say that like so snarky, but like truly, I just say it because I don't know how many times like I've seen it. It's like find something fun to do. Get out the paper towels and like paste the skirt up there and like, and make it like really interactive where they're like, oh, like, we have the little magnet dolls out and I'm going to pick this one and this one, or we're coloring together, we're painting together, and like you choose all the colors. What animal are we going to make today? Like, are we going to make, a purple hairy rat? Are we going to make an ugly turtle? Like, I don't know, but just trying to make it fun that way and trying to empower some choice making, even if it is low tech, like trying to teach them before they have the dynamic screen. Or we all know, like, right, like screens can be super fatiguing. Like, we know that, and we know that eye gaze is like I remember you guys like somewhere in the neighborhood of typical-ish. I mean, like it's all gray, but like there was a conference I was at where I was like the Vanna and I was showing eye gaze systems all day, right? And I was in Denver. I live in Fort Collins. And I went to drive home from Denver and my eyes were so fatigued. I had to pull over. I was like, I should not be driving right now. Like this is not safe. It takes it. So just think about like having a really complex body, just doing it in really small doses and doing like on communicator 5 there's like or oh I could give you a better example so that doesn't date me as badly. So now on Snap Plus they have like the board maker activities that you can link to in Snap Plus, and so you can just go get very simple pictures and you can get it so like if you're working with a little, right, like I'm assuming you're with kids, you can have it so like when their eyes get on the cow for 5/10 of a second, it's gonna move. And it's like, woo, and we make a big deal out of that, right? But we try to make it super fun, super engaging, but also like meeting our clients where they're at. And I think then I would talk to like the parents and maybe the private therapist. Like, hopefully you have the kind of relationship where you can have like kind of a heart to heart of like, we're trying all these things at school with the intention of building these like skills. No, it is not a candidacy based model, right? Like, we're not saying you can't have this until you do this because we all know that's bad. But like these are ways that we can do this in this setting that are very functional, that we're trying to build up this skill set so that this person can be a fluent and adept user. And that being said, I mean, still eye gaze is not for everybody. Like it's just not going to work for everybody. Or every year I host this, I call it a users panel for one of my classes. And I have like folks come in who are in their 20s and 30s and talk about like their experiences with AAC. And every year I have at least two who come who are like, I was on eye gaze for a while and I went back to my switches because that's faster for me and that's what I prefer as a person. And again, like on our triangle, right? Like 1, 2, I need one more hand, something. But like we're also like always considering the perspectives of the people we're serving. So yeah. So coming back to that too. I feel like that was a really long answer and I don't know that, but that's how I would handle it. Oh, thanks, Lauren. Um, okay. I'll try and take a couple more questions. Um, if anybody else wants to read. The two switch core scanner, can we email about that guy? My email's on the end because I just want to think about that one. If he's proficient with auditory scanning on blast, he's pointing at his screen, but you're more than welcome to email me. The master access class comes through. We just had one this summer, but it would be on the PRC Saltillo website, and or if you follow their page and get their emails, they would tell you when the next one is close to here. They have them frequently. So I would just email, my rep is Sherry Ann, but I think down south is it, oh gosh, I'm blanking on her name. I'm sure someone knows it, but our PRC Saltillo rep should be able to help us. What are some resources to learn how to actually start to even teach the technique of eye gaze to a child with CVI? Mhm. And where can you learn about different eye gaze devices? We don't have an SLP at the moment, so I want to learn as much as I can to share with mom. Nancy, will you email me and I'll send you some resources to learn about different devices? And then, yeah, like where to start with eye gaze. Did I talk about that a little bit in the last question? Did that answer? Okay, all right. Feel free to unmute yourself too if you want to, and we can just chat. All
Yeah,
right, and then I'll try and get through the last ones. Well, I'm sorry.
you did answer some of the questions.
Uh-huh.
I just know that it's very complex and I want to get as much information as I can. So
Yeah.
I'll email you.
Oh, please do. And then we can like talk about it more because there's lots of different ways to introduce just based on who um who you're working with. And I know like it can be a little daunting to like take on it can be a little daunting, right? To take on, especially like if you don't have maybe an SLP in your building who is like an AAC mentor. But there's lots of AAC mentors out there in social media. There's lots of trainings available on the different device companies' web pages. There's lots of opportunities. I know we have reps all the time out to our practice. And maybe that's something you could seek out to see if other SLPs like or other people on your team in your district would be interested in just having a rep come out and show you a device and letting you play with it for an hour. Like that's always, or letting you keep it for a week. I always learn best when I have opportunities to just interact with the tech on my own in my own time and just kind of tinker with it. I'm more of a hands-on learner that way, but there's all sorts of stuff out there, so we can totally work on that. Oh, Kelly Fonner, you're in my talk today. I'm so glad I didn't, I would have been nervous. Okay, one of the good responses to TBI concerns comes from Gail Porter. Thank you for referencing this. In AAC practice, language always wins. So just something to think about. That's a really, really thoughtful response. Thank you for sharing that. If you wanted the TBI with 4 buttons, if any of you have found yourself in that situation, that is a really good quote and information that was shared. Yeah. All right. And then thank you, Beth. Oh, thank you, Angel. I can sure try if I'm available at that time. Please feel free to send me an email. Are there any other questions anybody just wants to shout out, or anything maybe that you know more about than I do that you're like, well, I want to add to this or share this too? I know we only have a few minutes. Yep, and those are going to happen I don't have my glasses on, so it's really hard to read the small print, that had other eye conditions that the device couldn't calibrate. Again, the cameras are way, way, way better than they were even 5 years ago, but they're not perfect. Like, and again, eye gaze is not the end all be all. It's not going to fix, like, it's not, you have to, like, you still have to know about switch scanning. You still have to know about low tech. You still have to know about pod. You still have to know, like, there's a reason all those things are out there and there's a reason all those things are still used. So, there's going to be those clients and those kids. I have a client who is so not frustrated, but like is struggling so much to learn switch scanning, and he has two switch placements, and like he's doing exceptionally well, but I feel like he wants to do better. He not better, but faster. Like that's a better way to say it. He wants to be faster. Like I can tell he has a really fast brain. He has a lot on his mind. He has a lot of things he wants to talk about, and he's trying so hard to go fast. But then when he goes fast, he makes mistakes, and then he gets more frustrated. And like switch scanning makes me like sometimes want to pull my hair out because it is so very hard to teach, right? But we take our time and like we teach. Like it's okay to make mistakes. Like let's slow down. Let me show you how I would do this. Let's do this. Like click, click, boom, click, click, and we do things to make it fun. I would love to give him an eye gaze device. Better yet, I'd love to give him a device with direct selection, and I wish he could just use his fingers to tell me all the things he wants to tell me. But he can't. He can't move his hands, and he can't open his eyes. So like we're stuck with switches, and like thank goodness we have two of them, because he is not a patient little man. So he likes to go quicker. He likes to have two. That gives him more power and control. That works way better for him. But you're just not like I just don't. I want this presentation to be super encouraging. I want it to. I very much want to advocate for, let's not restrict access to eye gaze devices, but of course you're going to have those kids. It's just not practical. It's just not going to work. Okay, it's almost 4 o'clock. I did share my email at the end of my presentation, and Chris, I think Brenda said that was going to be shared with everyone.
Yeah, we will go ahead and send an email with a link to the slides.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask one more time, if you haven't yet signed in, to please take just a few moments, click on that link and get signed in. We'll also be posting the recording to the SWAC YouTube channel, and so hopefully we'll have a link to that as well.
All right. Gosh, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Like, this was so fun. I hope it was helpful and useful, and please don't hesitate to reach out if I can help in any way or connect you with resources. I'm so happy to do that.
Gosh, thanks, Jen. This has been
Yeah.
great.
Thanks, Chris. All right. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.